So, who are the best commentators in the UFC? Well, today, guys, we're going to be working now. I've got UFC commentators all around the screen, and I'm going to drag and drop them onto the tier list where I think they belong. Obviously, S tier is the best commentators, the ones that have the best takes, always spot on predictions and analysis, funny and entertaining, and then they just know what they're talking about. All the way down to F tier, who are clueless, not funny, rude, and just in general terrible commentators. So, I'm MMA Tizer. Subscribe if you're new here, and without further ado, let's get right into this tier list. Starting off with none other than one of the main men themselves, John Anik. He's going in. I think we're going to put him in A tier. Yeah, we're putting John Anik in A tier because I think he's one of the best commentators in the UFC. He's pretty funny. He may not have the best analysis because obviously he hasn't got a background rooted in MMA. But he's really good on the mic. Like, there's a lot of iconic moments that you know of John Anik, where he's shouting after an incredible knockout, and he's always the guy that gets to do the job after the knockout where he screams because he's the best at it. Out of all the commentators, he's the best, and he helps create iconic moments in the UFC. You'll hear many. I don't need to give you any examples. You know what I'm talking about, and that's why he's here. Always very consistent. He never really has a bad day. He's always good at least. And he can be pretty funny sometimes. He's pretty witty, got good one-liners. Does he say really random things at times that have nothing to do with the UFC? Yes, but we'll let him off for that because it's still kind of entertaining, even though he's trying to be helpful and informative. The only thing that limits him from being S tier is he doesn't have a complete MMA understanding compared to some of the other commentators who, were previous fighters or just really, really do know what they're talking about. So that's the only difference between him and an S tier commentator. Yeah, great commentator, John Anik. We move on. Joe Rogan. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, I think, but he's going in C or D. I think 2020 Rogan would have gone in C, but I'm going to put Joe Rogan in, like 2023 Joe Rogan in D. Because, truth be told, Joe Rogan doesn't really care about the UFC anymore, okay? He just shows up to get a massive, massive paycheck. I swear this guy's getting like 250k to commentate on one event. But, I would do it if I was him. But he just doesn't care as much, and you can tell because a lot of the guys who are fighting on the prelims and stuff, you can tell he has no idea who they are, where they've come from. You can tell he's blatantly reading off a script, and he's got very biased commentary. I don't need to. A prime example is Israel Adesanya versus Jan Blachowicz. He was honestly, if you weren't looking at that fight and just listening to his commentary, you'd think Adesanya was schooling Jan in every single round. And obviously, Joe Rogan, he can't have a fight or a fight card without mentioning how leg kicks have, revolutionized UFC fighting. And that would have been interesting if we hadn't heard it, first of all, 2,000 times before from Joe Rogan. And secondly, 10 years ago. Because it happened 10 years ago, Joe, okay? It's still the same. Leg kicks have been in the UFC for ages now. And that's how it is. So, he needs to stop mentioning that because every time I hear it, I know exactly what he's going to say. Leg kicks changed the game. It completely changed the UFC and how they fight. Yes, we know, Joe. We know. You've told us before. Anyway, that's Joe Rogan in detail. Prime Joe Rogan would have been a bit higher. He watched more UFC. You can tell he knew basically everyone in the UFC. Now he doesn't know the early prelims fighters, and he's incredibly biased. We move on. This is Brendan. No, this is Brendan Fitzgerald, I think. Oh no, sorry. This is not. This is John Gooden, right? And the reason I forgot his name is because he's just forgettable in general, right? He's just bang average at commentary. Like, Joe Rogan, at least he's kind of interesting sometimes, but John Gooden, he's just so bland. Like, he's not that bad of a commentator, but it's almost like you can predict exactly what he's going to say. Like, he's got alright takes, but they're just bang average. He never says anything interesting, ever. And that's why he's there. I don't really have much else to say about him because I can't think of anything to say because everything he says is so forgettable. And the reason I got him confused is because he's that boring. I got him confused with the other boring guy, Brendan Fitzgerald. Like, these two guys, they're so similar. They're just really bland commentators. And that's all I have to say about them. Like, they're not bad. They're just forgettable and boring. So I think there's a lot more people on commentary that are way more interesting that the UFC should hire. Not these guys. I'm not hating on them. They're not bad commentators. I'm just saying, have a bit of flair. Drop a hot take. Say something witty and funny because, like, it's so predictable. They may as well have AIs commentating nowadays. But anyway, we move on. Dean Thomas, F tier. I'm sorry, guys, but I'm putting Dean in F tier because he has Genuinely the worst takes ever. This guy literally every time he gets that little special appearance on some of the big fights, his like face appears in the bottom corner and he gets like 20 seconds to say something. He always drops the worst takes. Like he literally curses the fighter. If he compliments them, they'll go and get flatlined in the next round. Like he was literally saying how bad Leon was and how he was terrible, and basically it was a moral victory for him to survive and not get finished in the second Usman fight. And then literally Leon flatlines him literally like a round later. And it's just stuff like that where he gets it wrong again and again and again, and he has the most basic takes. There's nothing interesting. He wasn't even that good of a fighter, and his knowledge isn't even on par with some of the other guys that have been fighters. So I wouldn't really take advice from him because he was a bang average fighter. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Dean Thomas. He's 20 seconds of fame in the big fights. Shouldn't be there, and they should definitely cut him off the wage bill because he's doing absolutely nothing. We move on. Someone I do like on comms, Paul Felder. I like Paul Felder. I think he's a good interviewer and he's a good commentator. I think he's really good, and I think he should stay in the UFC. I think he's definitely one of the better ones, and I hope he's there for a long time because he's very very easy to listen to. He says good things, and obviously his background really helps. He says things that a lot of the other guys wouldn't know or wouldn't say. Way less deluded than Joe Rogan, way less biased. He's pretty honest. He does also, I do like this, he calls out the judges a lot, which is something I really like, because a lot of these guys, they're just complete company men and they won't criticize the judging whatsoever, but he does, so I respect that. He's pretty funny as well, got a few one-liners, so that is why he's there. Likeable dude, good interviews as well after the fight, and you're there, bro. We move on. Dan Hardy, he's going in it, okay? Where do I start with Dan Hardy? Like, this guy's just a meme at this point, to be honest. The stop the fight moment, that was hilarious. He had a bit of a power trip on commentary, and to be honest, that's how I describe it, right? When you give Dan Hardy a seat at commentary, he has a power trip. He goes crazy. He's also got the deadest predictions ever. If you look at his prediction YouTube channel, like, his picks are just so casual. Like, considering he was a fighter, he's got the most bang average picks, and he gets most of them wrong. He has a really bad prediction rate, like, especially compared with a lot of guys who have never been a fighter. They have way better prediction rates than him. Lots of YouTubers do. I probably do, to be honest. Well, I'm pretty sure I do have a better prediction rate than this guy. But he literally just sides with whoever is the most popular. He rides the hype trains. And considering he's an old UFC fighter, really bad takes. So, he's there. Has a power trip on commentary. Not very interesting, not particularly funny either. And that's why he said there's definitely better UK commentators, that's for sure. We move on. Laura Sanko. I'm putting Laura in C, right? Because Laura gets a lot of hate and I don't think she deserves it, right? Does she know the most about UFC? No. But is she a bad commentator? No, I'd much rather listen to her than listen to Dan Hardy, She's not even that bad. She's just an okay commentator, so she's immediately C tier, because a lot of these guys just are doing my head in at this point, They were fun 5 years ago, and now I just would rather not listen to any commentary whatsoever. So, she's going there. Obviously she's, pretty recently joined the commentary booth, but I'm sure she'll probably get on the pay-per-view soon. She kind of knows what she's talking about, not to the degree of some other people like Paul Felder, who's obviously above her. And she joins in with a crack. She's all right on comms, and she deals with it pretty well considering she's the first woman to be on commentary. She handles it really well. So, fair play to her. Much more tolerable than a lot of the other commentators. Has a little bit of personality and flair. All right interviews. She says some funny things sometimes. Actually makes fighters somewhat promotable, which a lot of these guys just fail to do, just with their boring personalities. And that's why Laura Sanko's in C tier. Actually an alright commentator. She gets overhated. We move on. Mike Bisping. Mike Bisping, I don't know. Would I, deliberately listen to Mike Bisping commentary? No, but is he better than these guys? Yeah, because at least, he's not forgettable, right? He says funny things that aren't meant to be funny, but they are. The Americans like him because he's got that classic British wit, and he is quite witty. The things that particularly annoy me about him is the fact that he just states the obvious sometimes. Like, I remember about a month or two ago, someone was in Top Mount and they were absolutely ground and pound demolishing another fighter who was literally doing everything they could to try and get him off the top mount and then get into a better position. And he went, "Oh, buddy, you better get off there, buddy. You're in trouble." But like, do you not think he knows that, Michael, mate? He's getting his head pounded in. But yeah, it's just stuff like that that kind of irritates me. And something else, he loves to like take away from the moment of other people. Like if he's interviewing someone and they've just had like a comeback win, instead of saying "what a comeback, well done," he'll be like, "Oh, you were getting absolutely demolished there, buddy. I mean, you fluked that one. Fair play to you, buddy." So he says stuff like that, which it's not very helpful for the fighter, and it can kind of annoy them, and then you're not going to get the best interview. He should just say, "Great comeback, bro." And it's just stuff like that where he takes away from them a little bit, and it irritates me, and it must really irritate the fighters, because they're the ones that he's actually being rude to, and it's a bit insulting, to be honest. But yeah, that's why he's there. Pretty obvious statement sometimes, but I mean, he's got a bit of personality, which compared to some of these guys, they have none of. And at least he doesn't mention leg kicks every single time. We move on. Another C tier one, DC. I mean, DC is so incredibly biased, but he can be quite funny sometimes. He isn't really afraid to take the conversation away from the UFC, which sometimes is quite good, because in a really boring match, no one wants to hear what's happening. Like, we literally don't care. We can see it with our eyes. If nothing's happening, instead of just trying to make it sound like something is actually happening and giving a reason why they're being so boring, DC just starts talking about something else. So start talking about like his favorite pizza chain, or like what he's going to do when he gets home, or what he's got planned for the weekend. So stuff like that, like just at least trying to spice it up, trying to save the boring UFC fight. And yeah, so that's why he's there. But he's so biased. That's why he can't go any higher on this list. He's so biased. You can tell. He literally like cheers for who he wants to win on commentary, which I'm kind of surprised is allowed. But Dana just must not care, because he's kind of getting desperate for commentary people at this point, if you couldn't tell. But like, when he's watching, like, I don't know, Khabib fight back in the day, he was like an avid Khabib fan, which I have no problem with. He's your mate. Obviously you want him to win, but like he was like trying to give Khabib advice and trying to make him hear it. And it's just crazy stuff like that. It just seems a bit unprofessional, because if you compare it with other sports like football, they don't really do that on commentary. It's a bit different. They try and remain a bit more unbiased. But DC throws all of that out the window. He doesn't care. And then he actually, accidentally makes interviews heated quite a lot. Like, I've noticed that. Like, he always picks, it seems like every time there's like a fallout between an interviewee and an interviewer, it's always DC is the interviewer. And it's kind of a pattern now, and it's, to me, it seems like the fighter's not the problem, it's DC. But I could be completely wrong when I say that, but it's just something I've picked up on. And I've just realized I've forgotten Dominic Cruz's image, but I'd probably put him in B tier, maybe B tier or C tier, because so just imagine I'm putting him there right now, because he is deluded sometimes. I mean, he said Conor was gassing Khabib out by getting battered, which obviously wasn't the case. But he can be funny sometimes. He's got some cigarettes and alcohol lines that were funny. He's not afraid to call judges out. He called Keith Peterson all nonsense, Keith, because obviously he doesn't like Keith Peterson because of the stoppage. But I think he's funny. Generally good analysis, lets himself down a bit sometimes. Good experience, because obviously he's been fighting at the top level of a stacked division in bantamweight. So if you compare it to DC, I'm not saying DC's like better or worse than him, but I'm just saying that bantamweights are definitely more high skilled than light heavyweights and heavyweights, especially at that point in time. So I'd say he maybe has more of a background to know about it, and obviously he's a better striker than DC was. So I definitely give him that credits. But some incredibly weird, deluded takes sometimes, but that's why he'd be there. And finally, who is the best commentator in the UFC? Well, it's actually someone who isn't an official brand partner of the UFC, but if this guy got an opportunity to go in the UFC, I think he should definitely do it. It's the MMA guy, okay? Because honestly, out of all these guys commentating, I'd much rather listen to him. He's funnier. He has generally better takes than pretty much all of them. Like, obviously, I know a lot of these guys have a UFC and MMA backgrounds, but they still drop dead takes, like Dan Hardy, for example. But Paul Felder definitely knows more about him, and he applies it well. But he's funnier. He's incredibly biased though, so that is a shame. But compared to a lot of these guys, he's just way more enjoyable to watch and listen to when you're watching a fight. And that's why I mute commentary most of the time nowadays, because they can hardly stand it. John Anik and Paul Felder do save it, but Paul Felder doesn't often get the pay-per-views, so Joe Rogan usually murks him for that and gets his 500k and then dips after dropping an absolute disaster class on the comms. But yeah, that's the tier list. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm Commentators. Subscribe if you're new here so you don't miss any future content. I do live streams and content every single day, and we're nearly at 1,000 subs. So if you do subscribe, I really do appreciate it. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and obviously this is more of a comedic one, and this is not factual. This is just my opinion. It's completely subjective. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.